Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. Have you ever had a big change in your life and needed a pivot? Today's show is for you. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. We're so excited to have an amazing special guest today. But before we do and get this introduced, we want you to like us. We really do. So like us on Facebook,
Yes.
YouTube. You can join us on a Tribe of Giants.
My whole identity is around you liking us.
That's it.
Please.
A like-a-meter. We want to be at a level 10.
Yes.
Unless there's 100, and then we want to be at 100.
Yeah. Yep. And anywhere beyond that is perfect.
So come join the party. Tribe of Giants on Facebook. Wake Up with Giants TV. Wake Up with Giants Radio. There's probably a lot more Wake Up with Giants things yet to come.
Yeah.
But this morning, Nick's going to introduce our guest.
I am. First thing, though, at the bottom, you're going to see scrolling across the Kickstarter. So make sure you go do that. Support our Kickstarter. We've got about 19 days left before we're complete on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm going to introduce Julie Wieler out of Canada, Calgary, I believe. And in 2015, she had a pivotal moment in her life. Her husband was diagnosed with lung disease, and that changed their lives forever. So she went from being a stay-at-home mom and started realizing she's got to do something different. So she went back to school, started a business, and dove into the personal development arena. And what she learned was that we are all meant to do incredible things, and we're meant to be surrounded by an incredible community that supports us as we do those incredible things. Sounds like a movie, right? And so today she works with people to grow their businesses. She helps a nonprofit organization, probably going to be more of that to come. And she started an important project called the Women's Impact Academy. And what they do is educate in business, marketing, finance, wealth, relationships, communication, personal, and spiritual alignment, and creating a transformative mindset. So we want to welcome you to the show, and we're excited to share your story. Did I do all right there? I was trying to read that as though I'm making it up from the top of my mind, but
that was amazing. I was like, whoa, that's like, I read it before.
Holy crap. Yeah, right.
It always feels different when somebody else is reading it.
Yeah, write your bio as though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. I'm so excited to be here. Like, honestly, I just feel so honored and blessed to be on Wake Up with Giants TV.
Well, I get a sense that your journey is going to be very helpful to those that are watching. And so let's dive in. Let's go back in time and look at where it all began. What was life like growing up?
For me, I grew up, I have three brothers, my mom and dad. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had a few small businesses based out of the home. And so, I had a really good childhood growing up. My brothers and I were, I was a tomboy, had lots of boy cousins. I think there's 15 of us and there's only 3 of us girls. So, we had a lot of fun, and I was always that kid who just went with it and would try anything. And so for me, when my husband and I got married, I grew up in that traditional, like, mom would stay home, dad would go to work. And this was like the life that we, had talked about that we wanted. And, I loved being a stay-at-home mom. And to our 2 boys, we have 2 boys. And that really felt like my purpose at that time. And it was just interesting that, in 2015, when everything changed, it was a really incredible journey of understanding that our purposes may change throughout our lives. So
I love that. So yeah, your purpose up to that point was what you had in mind. You were living your purpose, and then something happened and it shifted. And so that's really important, that you might have multiple purposes in life. What does that mean to you? Like, what is a purpose to you?
Well, I just, going back to when I was a stay-at-home mom, like, I really felt like my purpose or like my job on this planet is what I think my purpose is at that point, was to make sure that I am raising kids that will do and be good in the world. So like I really took that seriously, you know, like I was going to make sure they were loved and understood what love felt like. And I was going to make sure that they understood what service was and how to be of service to people and how to, you know, all of these things that I thought were fundamental values just within me, I wanted to make sure that they also had. And so that was what I felt like my purpose was to like find the joy and give them a joyful upbringing, but also understand that there's a big world out there and that they have a voice that should be used and things like that. But I don't even know. I mean, now I feel like even after all of the work I've done, I feel like I barely knew a fraction of what I get to teach them now. So that's really exciting too.
Yeah. So when you had this experience, your husband's diagnosed with lung cancer, right? Lung disease.
Yeah, it's a lung disease. It's
different
a little
from
bit
cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So he gets diagnosed with this. You have this shift. I can imagine. So I want to go to that experience because this was a pivotal moment in your life, transformative, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you get the news he's got lung disease. He's not going back to work, right? Mm-hmm. What was that like? What came up for you around that?
You know, that moment, and I can replay it in my head like it was yesterday because I remember we went out for my 30th birthday. My husband had taken me away for the weekend and we came back Sunday night. It was December 16th. And he just started feeling sick and we were like, oh, okay, maybe you're just got the flu or something like that. And he hasn't felt good since. And he went from being like a really active guy. He worked out in the field in oil and gas, and he was, you know, awake for hours on end, you know, super active dad, to being awake for maybe 4 hours a day. And so like it just completely changed. And I remember we were really grateful. We have an incredible doctor, and she, when she started running the tests, she said, you know, I think he's got this funky disease called sarcoidosis, which is what his disease is. And it affects many people all different ways. But so we had to go and do the test. He had to get a lung biopsy done. And I remember sitting in the waiting room of that appointment, and the doctor who's his specialist for the last few years sat down with me, and he said, normally I wouldn't do this without him here, but he's coming out of the anesthesia. And he's like, I need to tell you something because it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be this funky disease called sarcoidosis, which we don't know much about, and I can't give you a prognosis because it's a wait and see game, or it's a very aggressive form of lung cancer in which I need to tell you need to start to get your affairs in order.
Wow. Holy crap.
And so that moment, I was like, it was almost like an out of body experience where I was like, I just turned 30. I have 2 small kids. And you're telling me like I could be widowed? Like, what? Like, this isn't real life. Like, it just felt so foreign. But then as the days progressed and we got the diagnosis that it was not lung cancer, thank goodness, we were like, okay, that's one blessing already. Let's take that blessing and let's see how we can keep collecting blessings as opposed to worrying about the outcome, because we don't know what, like, and I mean, really in life, nobody knows how much time you have, but this was just that magnifying glass of like, okay, things are about to change. And so how can we, you know, collect the blessings and figure out how to move forward? And so we started like a jar, and we would put in little things as, you know, our blessings and what we're grateful for. And we still have the jar. And so we would write things like, you know, we have more time with him than we've ever had because he used to work away. And so now he's home every day. And so our kids got way more time with their dad growing up, even though he wasn't necessarily as active as he could be, like was before. He still made sure that the hours he was good, he focused on us. So he made sure, you know, if he was awake, he was helping with homework or he was doing school pickup. Like he would nap in the middle of the day when our kiddos were at school so that he could be there for pickup at the end of the day and just like be a part of what he could be a part of. And so that was a really incredible, I look back on it now, it was definitely hard because I went from being, you know, a wife who had a partner to essentially being a sole caregiver for my husband and our kiddos. So, and thank goodness we have a ton of support around us. Like my parents are close by. And so I was able to lean into, and I live in the town that I grew up in. So I had a really good support network for that. And that was another thing, that blessing went into the jar, like, so.
Yeah. So I want to point some things out, because your life is going along just great. No shifts, no nothing. Your husband gets sick. And then you get this diagnosis. He's got lung disease, right? So there's awareness created, like, holy crap, life isn't the same. There's something else that's going to come up. And then you create this acceptance around it. Like, well, this is what it's going to be. And this is where a lot of shift doesn't happen. Like, shift happens, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So this is where people resist the shift, though, is they don't want to accept the news or the awareness. Like, this is what is occurring in your life, is your husband has lung disease and it's not going backward. And so accepting that it doesn't mean you love it, but what I love that you did after is that you did love it. You gave it grace, and you gave gratitude for it. And so there's that third step. So the first step was the awareness that something's changing. And then the second is it's okay. Like, this is how it's going to be moving forward. And then the third is give gratitude for it. So in this process of growth, you went from awareness to acceptance to gratitude, which most people, or some people, not most, go from awareness to resistance to despisement, right?
Yeah.
And fighting.
Resentment, things like that.
Resentment, right? Resentment, which means to re-feel those
bitterness, anger.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there was a step in there too that I think is really crucial.
Yeah.
And I actually had to, because I felt that resistance for a little while.
Yeah.
And then one of my dear friends, God bless her, because this is like a piece that I took with me and will continue to take with me, is she said, you have to grieve the loss of the life you thought you were going to have, and take the time to feel that. And she said, work your way through that grief, because what you're about to step into will never be the same.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was a really important step for me too, because I was like, it isn't going to look the same, Yeah.
Think of that. That's a step that we might miss, is feeling that grief, because we go straight from, I shouldn't feel bad about this. I should just go from where I am, acceptance, to gratitude.
Yeah.
And you went from acceptance to grief to gratitude.
Yep. And had I not gone through that grief process,
Yeah.
I would not have been able to move into the gratitude, because that grief process allowed me to set aside all these plans that I thought we would have, all these things that I thought we would do.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I really do visualize it as like setting the bag down, like putting that all down and going, okay, that's just not what I'm carrying anymore. That's not what I'm looking forward to. That's not destined for me. And there's a reason for it. And I'm good with that. And I have faith in that. And so that was like, truly one of the greatest pieces of advice that I've ever been given, is just like, grieve the life that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah. To fully let go in that, what an amazing thing, because we talk about letting go in life, and the life that you thought you were going to have. We've had people on that have been paralyzed. We've had people who are amputees on the show. And one of them, Angie Barnett, talks about grieving the loss of her legs. She wants to go home to the old life. I just want to go home, right? I get homesick, is what she would say. And you might have those feelings, but grief allows you to transcend, to get past that. Yeah. What an amazing thing to go from the life you thought you were going to have to something different.
Yeah. It really, it allowed space. Yeah. Because like, I really truly believe that when we resist something, it persists. Like, what we resist persists, that old saying. And so if you resist having that grief process and really letting yourself feel it, you're not going to ever create the space for something new, in my experience anyway. I'm speaking from my own experience. So
so grief creates a void, and from that void you can create anything you want. And you chose to fill it with gratitude. And you appreciated that experience. So you took it and you added value to it. And I love the use of language, because it's so important, because it highlights what's going on here. as people are looking at their lives, we're all facing different things. We had somebody on the park bench this week, her dog passed away. For someone else, that might not be a severe experience, but for her, that's her family.
Yeah.
And so to allow space for that grieving, right? That is a loss.
Yeah.
Creates a space to add something to your life, right?
Yeah.
But if you stay in that space of grief, that could also take you in another direction. Like if you never come out of that void, then you don't grow. You don't get into what you could be.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
I love spending a little time on this because it anchors in for me, it anchors in the learning of it, allow for grief.
Yeah.
What does grief look like?
For me, grief looked like a whole number of things. Like at points it was being in tears and being very sad. And then other times it was angry because I wasn't sure that I wanted this new life. But then the acceptance of it and the surrender was huge, was just understanding like, okay, like maybe I am meant for something different. And so there was all different pieces of it that grief came in and showed its face for me. And we've actually in our family experienced some tragic losses as growing up. And so I understand that grief ebbs and flows. And so there are still sometimes, even now, 6 years later, where I go, oh, like we didn't do that. And like it comes back and there's just these tiny, and they're not nearly as powerful as they were in the beginning, but still things that I go, oh, we never did that, or oh, I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that. But then I also shift now very quickly into, oh, but that's okay, because if we don't do that, there's space for something else. And so
I have a visual that came up for that, just like you throw a rock in the water and the splash and the wave that comes off of it in the beginning is huge. And so there's this huge wave that comes off. And as it gets further out, that wave diminishes and diminishes until it becomes nothing. It just flattens, right? And so the closer you are to grief is like where you are to that splash, that you're going to have a big wave in the beginning. But as you move further away from it, it dissipates and thins out until it doesn't impact you. But it does ebb and flow, just like you were talking about.
I want to point out something too, real quick, that's interesting, because just because what worked for Julie or for anybody, like, might not work for somebody else. I like this comment. You said that grieving about something that was never going to happen keeps me stuck in the loss. And that's okay. Find what works for you. Sometimes this, what I'm going through or what I'm feeling or how I deal with grief might not be the way that you would deal with grief. And that's okay. But find out, I think the big thing is feeling that, recognizing the grief, and then figuring out where to pick up the pieces and how to move through that. He had a different thought as well. It's a different thought. Grief is the purest form of love. Yeah.
My grandmother, I love that saying, because my grandmother used to always say grief is the price we pay for love. And so it really is powerful I know grief is different for everybody, but when I can name it, then I can go through it. So if I go, oh, this is probably a piece of grief that I'm holding on to, or a transition that is a grieving process, then mentally I just go, okay, this is a season and seasons change. So I'm going to let myself find the beauty in this season and also know that it's going to end. So
yeah, if you don't know what it is, it's really hard to manage something that you're not fully conscious of, right? How do you change a behavior that you don't know you have, or emotion that you don't know what the emotion is?
Yeah. And just naming it I was able to kind of allow that space for myself to go through it and not beat myself up about being angry, or like, oh, why am I angry? Or why am I, like Christina just said, name it to tame it. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's just sometimes it rears its ugly head and you don't love that. But if you don't know what it is, then you're never able to change it if you need to. So
yeah, man, this is such a powerful thing. I'm picturing the process in the book, right? He has a life he doesn't know it could be different. He's eating pea soup. He's sitting there. Everything's normal. And then he hears the giants, and all of a sudden things are not normal. There's like giants, and he hasn't been aware of them. And then from there, he goes and talks to his family, starts to feel this sadness about the life that he used to know that no longer serves him. And so he feels that sadness, that grief, right? Then he steps out onto the uncertain path. And that's where we're at in your story and your journey, is he steps out on this uncertain path. And here you are, your husband has lung disease, you're grieving it, you choose to give it gratitude. And then all of a sudden, okay, I got to do something. So tell us about that. How did that feel to go from that grieving to gratitude to now action around a new life?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was really blessed to have certain people in our lives at certain times. And my son's grade 1 teacher was just a blessing in and of herself. She was just an incredible lady. And one of the things that I loved was I always got to volunteer in the classroom. And so being a stay-at-home mom, I got to be a part of that aspect of our kids' lives. And so when Sheldon got sick, my husband, I was worried I would lose that. And she asked me, if I had ever thought about becoming a teacher. And because she's like, you're so incredible in the classroom, you have such a beautiful energy, the kids love you. Have you ever thought about this? And I was like, I had not thought about it, but I don't know if I have the capacity to take on an education degree at this point, because it was such a huge undertaking. So I ended up going to school to be an education assistant, because then I could still be in the classroom. And we're really blessed because in our kids' school, I had told them that I was thinking of doing this, and they were like, you let us know when you're done, because you will come and work at this school so you can be with your kids, and you can also, still have these moments of being in their classrooms, but also being able to provide for your family. And so I started with school in that area. And then what ended up happening was actually somebody had talked to us about something for my husband's health. And so I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to also take that on a little bit, because there was the opportunity for us to build a little business in the health industry. And that I ended up building that business just because I love people and I love helping people, to a point where I actually didn't need to be an education assistant in the classroom financially. I got to still go into the classroom, but I was able to not have to financially depend on that role. And so it was such a blessing, though, because then I had the skills and tools to go into classrooms as a volunteer and support them without them having to worry about paying me. And so it ended up being like this win-win, because I got to be in the classroom, I got to run a business and help people with their health, and so I was just like, there were so many blessings, and the people that I met within that health business really, truly held space for me to go through what I was going through. And a lot of them had said, hey, I've walked a similar path, like if you ever need support. And so it opened up this community that I just didn't even know existed. It was like the giants, right? It was like, well, he walks in and he just didn't even know that this kind of community existed. And so
they're out there.
They really are.
do. I hear like,
like looking behind you, like, ooh.
I know, I want one of those backgrounds.
So I'm, just while you're saying this, it might be a little off topic, but it's going to tie together here. I was thinking of Oprah, and she wanted to be in a particular movie, and they told her no. They're like, you're not an actor. There's no way you're going to be in it. And she decided, okay, I guess it's not meant to be. Even though she felt fully connected to this thing, they ripped it away from her. And so she felt this sadness and loss. And there was this point where she said, if this is the way it's supposed to be, then I'm good. And I'm going to go do something else. I'll grieve the loss. I'm going to let go and I'll move on. And Steven Spielberg calls her. She's out at a fat farm. She's trying to lose weight. He says, if you lose a pound, you're not getting this part. So she runs to the shop, gets an ice cream to make sure she didn't lose a pound, right? And so she got the part. But it was in that grieving and letting go of the life that the way she thought it would be that opened the door for it to be the way she wanted it to become. And in a way she didn't expect. And so you're anchoring in a point that I haven't seen in the past as a vital step. That grief opens up the void for us to let go of the life we think we need it to be, so that it can become what it can become. And here you go down this path of, I don't know what it looks like on the other side of this. You didn't have a vision of doing what you are today when you began this journey. So you step out on that uncertain path and you're like, I don't know, but I'm willing to let go of what I had. And I'm going to step into the uncertainty. And for now, this is what I think is the best step. I'm going to go and teach. And it opened the door for a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is letting go. That is letting go. That's where people wonder, like, how do you let go? You grieve it. You have sadness for the loss of the thing you thought was going to be, which opens the void for something else to come in, or for the same thing to come in, but the way it needs to come in. I mean, you tell me on that. Am I
Totally. You're like right on point. And kind of in your Giants book, I had this feeling of like when he's going through the forest.
Yeah.
And
okay.
you have this vision of like what you're seeing is scary and all of the things. But then if we think about and create the story of a more positive outlook, the whole situation changes. And for me, that was part of it. Like being surrounded by this community of dreamers and doers and, people who were really thinking like giants was incredibly powerful for me, because then they opened up my eyes to what was possible. And so they took the scary away, even though we had already kind of started doing a little bit of that on our own. They were able to walk beside us and say, okay, no, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? You're talented in this. So, and it's almost like you take each level of scary away, kind of like an onion. And then you get like, it's just each step forward, you feel more confident, you kind of walk a little higher. And like, it's
You're blowing my mind right now. Like, I'm reading this week. I'm going to hang on to that. Like we're going to keep going on that.
Okay.
So I'm reading, I'm not highly religious. I'm spiritual. I was reading a scripture and it says, fear not, because I'll go with you. And that's what giants do is, look, I'm not going to do it for you, but don't worry. I'm right here beside you. I'm right here with you. And what you're saying is that when you surround yourself with giants, they take the scary away. It's like mom and dad, like, trust me, I've been here before. So lean on my trust in this to build your own trust. And our kids don't develop their own trust till about the age of 25. Their brains fully develop at the age of 25. So we create that space where we're their brain and we show them how to trust. But giants, when we're in that space where now we need to lean on somebody, they're the ones that give us that space to lean on them and use their trust to now develop our own. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that is really what it was for me. I remember, one of my really good friends said to me, if you don't feel like you can carry it, let me carry it. And so if it's, he had gone through like a really challenging phase of life too, and he could relate to me in a way that, he had carried his wife through illness and things like that. And he said, I get it. Sometimes this is so heavy. And sometimes you just need somebody to sit with who knows how heavy that burden is. And I'll just carry it for a little while, whatever you need. And so it was just that support and just knowing you're not alone that brings a little bit more light into that dark forest too. And I mean, I always say like, I'm so grateful I was surrounded by so many rays of sunshine, because in that dark and what could have been a really challenging time in life, I feel like I had so many beams of sunshine that could light the way for me. So
this is so amazing. Like you are hitting every point in the book.
This is why I was so excited to talk to you guys about the book.
Because the beauty of the book is it ties into everybody's journey. We all go through a similar journey. And that's the metaphor of the book is you're unaware that you need to even make a change. Then you become aware. And then you accept, wow, my life's never going to be the same. And then you grieve the loss of your life. And then you step onto the uncertain path. And then you find yourself among giants who let you stand on their shoulder and see the world a little differently. And then as you're going through the dark forest, they reassure you with, look, I've been here. I used to get scared. I still have those stories come up. But what I can tell you is this. And then we lean on their trust. We lean on the trust of others to build our own trust. And then as we do that and we repeat it, we find out for ourselves, man, I have the confidence to do this for me. And we become our own giant. And then we turn around and we do it for somebody else. Like this is you're amazing. Like you're going literally through that transition process of my life is never going to be the same.
Yeah.
Just like losing a loved one, just like losing a limb, just like being paralyzed, just like all of it. Your life is never the same. So now what? Yeah.
Yeah. That's why, honestly, like when I read the book, I was just so touched by it because I could literally feel the journey, and each piece I could say, okay, yeah, like I totally get this piece of it. I totally get this piece of it. And so and I wouldn't change anything now. Like my husband getting sick, although he's still sick, our marriage is stronger than ever. And because we've spent so much time together. When COVID happened, we gave some of our friends advice on how to live in the same space because we had done it 6 years ago. It's okay, you guys are going to need your own space, so you got to figure out this side of it. And so it was that feeling of like, then you get to turn around and help who's next. And so that was one of like my greatest learnings in all of this. Was I was listening to somebody do a presentation, and they said, when you've reached a certain level, you can turn around and help the people behind you. And it doesn't even have to be a really high level, because a fourth grader is still a god to a second grader. You don't have to be done the journey in order to turn around. You can just help who you're further ahead than.
I got to write that down. And I'm going to do a quiet pause there, and it's okay because one, it gives people time to reflect. But as you giant, if giant was a verb, like an action, as you giant, it is now official verb of the giants and the smalls. When you giant,
making verbs.
Giant, you can turn around and serve others, because the level that you're at is a higher level than where someone else might be. And sometimes we think, well, when I make it, then I'll turn around and serve. Mm-hmm. I think, Ryan, you mentioned that earlier, like maybe you didn't. Maybe I just made that up in my head.
Probably did at some point.
Big conversation that I just had.
You guys are just connected telekinetically.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying to him right now.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. I received it.
Glad you got it. Perfect.
No, but often we wait until we make it. If I make it, then I'll turn around. I'll come back and serve you. But I got to make it first.
Yes, I love this right here. Gianting.
Yeah, gianting.
I'm going to go gianting today.
Beautiful. So you serve others as you grow, mm-hmm. Not as you go, but as you grow. Mm-hmm. So what's coming up?
Yeah, I think like for me, when I think about that, you had said like most often we think I have to make it and then I'll turn around and serve, but you don't make it until you turn around and serve. And so for me, that was like one of my biggest learnings was like, I was going through this for a reason. What was that reason? And since that happened, I've been able to kind of sit with people and have these really deep conversations of like, hey, have you ever thought that maybe you need to grieve how that looked? Or, hey, like, I promise you can go from having this like solid life plan and the whole thing can derail. And now you can become the architect of the life by design.
Yes.
And so it gives
straight out of Catherine Lee.
Yeah. Well, that I love her. She's like, there are so many pearls of wisdom that I have got from Catherine that I will take with me forever and she is one of the reasons why I have this viewpoint of like, sometimes something's going to come in and it's going to completely interrupt you. And if you haven't read her book, Interrupted, it really is like an incredible story of how do you step into that after something has happened and create something that is absolutely so giant and serve so many people. And so I have been so blessed to be around mentors like Catherine that even before I knew Catherine, like knew her, she was one of my mentors because I had gotten her book and I had learned from her in our business. And I remember listening to her on stage and being like, oh my gosh, like heart-centered leadership can be a real thing. Like I'm not a really outspoken person in a group. of people. However, I did a leadership retreat a few years ago, and I remember the facilitator said to me, sometimes the leader is not always the loudest one in the room. And then learning from Catherine and all of these things, it's really helped me step into, okay, my gifts and talents might look different, but now with what I've been handed in life, how can I use those gifts and talents to really make impact and be of value and serve and show our kids that sometimes, like, life's going to be hard sometimes. That's just the reality of it. And we're built to do hard things.
Yeah. Can we leave this one up right there?
I like it. Yeah, that's why I put it up, because I think that's a good one, Amanda. Thank you. Speaking of giants, there's a giant right there.
You put it up to keep it up. Let's keep it up.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, we get so concerned and attached to things that haven't yet come. And this is where the ego is trying to support us, and everybody, I think ego gets a bad rap, right? But what the ego is doing is it's trying to make sense of reality and fiction. I mean, not reality and not yet reality. Mm-hmm. And so it's the bridge between the two. And so it's looking in the future and it's trying to project out like what's possible. And then as it sees, look, here's a pathway that we could go on, and this is really good for us. And it anchors in, it says, I'm attached to this because I think that's the way we need to go. And then it doesn't happen. And the ego says, I knew it. It's like, I'm going to protect you. We're never going to go through that suffering again. And so I'm going to anchor this in for you so that you can remember this, so that the next time this comes up, we don't do that again. And so it's your servants, your humble servants. Like, I'm looking out for you, not only now, but in the future. And when you let go, when you have that grieving process and you're able to let go of the future, it takes some of that pressure away. Like, what if it never turned out the way you thought? What if, as an example, this book, what if it never became a bestseller? What if it never impacted 100 million lives as we have as a goal? What if it never happened? What if it never became a movie? Would I be okay? Would I be able to grieve that and be okay that, well, it is what it is. Now what? Mm-hmm. And I almost want to say question mark, like I'm speaking text to speech, or whatever. I get in that habit of dictating my words. What comes up as you hear that?
That for me is huge, because when that detaching from the outcome, and I actually had a really good talk with a good friend of mine about this just recently, about, I do have like a lot of drive. I love to be ambitious, all of these things, but sometimes I get lost and I forget to enjoy the journey because I'm so focused on the outcome. And it's this beautiful line of, okay, if things don't turn out in this beautiful dream and vision that I have, what really matters? And would I be okay? And the answer is always yes. Like, the answer is, if you choose to go through all of it, you'll always be okay. Like, there are hard things that we go through. And when we can go through them, and actually, if we need support as we go through them, if we need more resources as we go through them, we will still get through them. My grandfather, I love him to pieces. He lived through the war over in Holland. And some of the stories he tells me, I just give me, so much perspective on the things that we go through. And he's also one of the longest living transplant patients in the world. Oh, so wow. He's had his new liver for 26 years, I think it is. And so I think about all of the things. And so I think about all of the things that he's gone through and seen, and the blessings he's given. And he is one of the most grateful men I've ever met in my life. He's just like this ray of sunshine.
Okay, now that you've built him up, I'll believe you now.
Yeah. But he always says to me, he always will say, like, that didn't turn out the way I thought, but it was so much better. Like, it ended up being so much better than I could have envisioned it, but it changed. And so I spend every Friday morning with him. And so we have some of the greatest conversations and just some of the greatest learnings that I could have ever asked for. And that perspective, right? Like, if you have somebody you can lean into that gives you perspective, but also holds space for you to go through things, I think that's like one of the greatest gifts you can ever receive.
Well, Ryan, you brought me on to Jim and Andy.
Mhm.
And one of the things that he talked about, Jim Carrey talked about, is that all the audience wants is to let go. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, just briefly?
Yeah, quickly in the movie, in the Netflix documentary that I stumbled upon on late at night, Jim Carrey was playing Andy Kaufman, and then they did a documentary about him playing Andy Kaufman. And um, yeah, ask me that question one more time.
Yeah,
and
no,
it'll-
you're good. I got your train of thought. So he was talking
Yeah.
about Jim and Andy, and he was talking about the audience,
Yes.
and he becomes Andy Kaufman.
And what was the question again?
Well, not a question, more an explanation, and maybe this will trigger it. So when he goes to perform,
Mm-hmm.
what Jim Carrey found was that the audience didn't care about
Letting go.
Yeah, they wanted to let go.
Well, I was going to tell this whole story and then tell me to be brief, and then I'm like, oh crap. I'm not very good. I'm not very good at brief. So Jim Carrey was he was struggling. He was struggling as an artist, as a comedian, and he was just trying to figure out. He was showing up and trying to do whatever he thought the audience wanted, but he couldn't really figure him out. And then one day it dawned on him that he would do the weirdest, dumbest things, right? The faces that he makes. Everyone knows Jim Carrey and his faces, and he's like, and he like grabs his face and pulls it apart and does weird stuff. And then they started laughing, and he realized the audience just wants to let go. They don't want to have a care. They want to come and see something funny and laugh and just step outside of their life and the things that they're going through and just be entertained and laugh and let go. And once he realized that, everything shifted for him, because then he knew his purpose. He knew how to get the audience to laugh. And that was by being himself too, because that's how he was. He was just that way and funny, and just step into it and give them what they want.
Yeah, you both are hitting on the formula here. Julie, you're giving a component of the formula, which is grief, which is the loss of the thing you were attached to. And the more you can detach from something, whether it's now or in the future, the more likely you are to have what you need for your life, your purpose. The more you are to realize your purpose. And that purpose is made up. Like, it's made up. Like, so that's why you're going to have multiples.
I love this too, because Andy, he played Andy Kaufman so well. You think it really is Andy Kaufman, by the way. It's amazing.
So Julie, I want to dive back in and bring this back to you. So you're going down this path, which opens up the door as you grieve and let go in different areas multiple times. As you grieve and let go, other things come in. And it didn't turn out the way I thought. It's better, right? Like Grandpa says, it turned out actually better. And so keep going with your journey. What happens next?
So it was really funny because I had never, ever thought about running a business. I had never thought about being a business owner or anything like that. But then what I found when I started running my small business was that I actually really loved it. I loved helping people. I loved kind of the ins and outs of business. And what I actually really loved was I started to learn about marketing. And because I love to learn about why people connect with a certain message and what it is that really draws people to look for a solution to a problem. And so it was funny because I actually started taking marketing classes and courses because I wanted to grow my business. And so my business started to grow, but other people were learning, like seeing what was happening, and they started asking, well, can you help me with my business?
Wow. Yeah. Isn't that crazy how that's how it goes? Can you do that for me?
Yes, of course I will. But what was really incredible about it was that when I stepped into that arena, which was a new arena for me, which is always scary. And, it's one thing to do it for your own business. It's a whole nother thing to do it for somebody else's business. For me, it really became like this calling of like, okay, you're going to say yes to everything, even though you're only 50% ready. And that 50% is going to the other 50% is going to force you to keep learning and keep growing and keep, sharpening your craft. And so I loved it. Like, I really loved it. I've learned from some of the best marketers in the world. I have, there's this one book that is actually the most stolen book from any public library, because it's like the Bible of marketing. Yeah. And so I finally
they steal it from the library.
They do, yeah. And so I paid for mine. I did not steal mine. I paid for mine.
I was hoping you stole it. Yeah. You drive it like you stole it.
And so by saying yes when I wasn't even really fully ready, it allowed me the space and the motivation to keep growing. And I always became what I needed to become in the process. Like, the process became this beautiful. Yeah. And I realized that action, that action created momentum for me. And really now, like, I really believe that when you get clear on the life you want to design, and I know that there will be hiccups and things that will come in, and it may not look exactly the way I design it, but the reality is taking the time to actually start to design it and really dream big and see how much service we can be of, and all of these different things allows me to be very creative. Like, even working with you guys, one of the things that I had said to you earlier was just that, for me, when I look back on my life, if I can say kids got this book and they got to understand how to live like a giant, I will sit in my rocking chair when I'm 80 and feel like that was worth it. Yeah. I don't know how to look, but I'll just be so grateful that if one kid says later on down the road in Canada here, like, I'm a giant because of that book, I'll know that it was worth whatever the work that goes.
There's a lot of Canadian giants, by the way.
I know.
We got a few of them on this call, so that's amazing.
I know. I love our country.
You said something blatantly obvious that is so impactful. That action creates momentum, and it's our inaction around our dreams that causes a loss of momentum. It causes a lack of momentum. And I think of somebody, if I were to imagine that I have this creation, this vision in mind, right? That I want to create that vision as clearly as I can. And then if I never got it, I would be okay to detach from it, right? But then if I never take any action around going down the uncertain path to create that, then there is no momentum. There's no growth on it. And as we take action, we create momentum, we create mass. And as we know that all matter consists of mass, of momentum and energy and motion. Mm-hmm. And so when things matter, that means that they have some weight. And then when they have some weight, they get even more mass and they grow, just like the tribe of giants. I mean, we started with just Ryan and I dancing out in the field like weirdos. And then all of a sudden we have 2,700 people now. And it keeps growing every day. But that momentum, that mass couldn't have occurred without the action, without the momentum, and then continued action. We continue to take action, not knowing what the next step is going to be. And that's what you're talking about here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I firmly believe, and I have this quote in my office, is you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. And like, you don't have to have the whole vision. And I know that personality types, some people are long-term thinkers, some people are short-term thinkers, some people are very analytical, some people are more action-oriented. But one of the things, and I find this especially in my marketing, is that, you can have all of the content, all of the branding, but until you actually put it out into the world, you won't have feedback on if it's powerful or if what you need to change. And the same goes true in any area of life. Until you actually put it out into the world, I think you won't have that feedback of like, oh, okay, where do I need to go next? And you just sit stuck in that place of inaction. And I think it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of people can get stuck in that planning process and never take the first step.
Is anybody else hungry?
Yeah, I want pancakes.
Me too.
So the feedback shows the next step, right? Mm-hmm. So without that feedback, you're not really sure what the next step should be. It's, if I'm stumbling here, then I might pull back and move over here. But if you're not in action, you're not going to stumble, and therefore you're not going to have feedback, and you're not going to know the next step. And so, like Hugh said, sitting is an action. It's an action of inaction, right?
It's a choice.
Yeah. And so the feedback is no movement. And in this case, where you're moving towards an unknown path, and that's the beauty. I have that shirt that says my path isn't straight, and it's a tree. And just like our lives are like that tree, they branch out. And Hugh will probably drop the F word here in a minute. Fractals. There we go. It's self-fulfilling prophecy right there. But our lives are branched. They're uncertain. They're not like a linear path like we like to have. Our ego wants a linear path. It wants to know the whole picture before we step on the journey. And once we have that, it still won't step on the journey because it'll find some other damned excuse to not do it. And so sometimes we have to override ego and go and take the step and just get feedback and adjust.
Yeah. One of the most powerful things that I've learned over the last few years is like to understand my relationship with quote unquote failure.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I used to be afraid of like just trying anything because I was afraid to fail. But what I realize now is that action will give you feedback, and it's never a failure if you're willing to take that feedback and learn and go and say, okay, that was efficient, but that was not efficient. And so how can I move? And okay, that kind of taught me that I really like that, but I maybe don't like this aspect as much as I thought I would, until, you kind of keep, and then you keep compounding. Like it's this compound effect of action that breeds results. And if anybody's familiar with compound interest, it looks like this until it looks like this.
Hey,
and so
that's how we do Kickstarters. I love to joke about the idea that it's like an albatross, because that's what makes the most sense to me. If you've ever seen the movies or the shows where they're running across the beach and they look clumsy and you're like, there's no way. And then all of a sudden it gets in the air and this thing's majestic.
Yeah.
And that's compound interest. That's the law of compounding efforts, is that you're going to go and go and go and go. And then all of a sudden there's this break. You could look at our tribe of giants. You'll see this flat line just about. And then about a year ago, it just popped and it just went through the roof. And so your goal isn't to worry about when it's going to go through the roof. It's to feel it when it's time to fly, you fly. But your job is to stay in momentum, because without that, you're not going to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my mentors said one of the greatest skills you can learn is to fall in love with the steps, not the result, the steps that will get you there. Fall in love with taking the action. It may not breed a result right now, but I don't know if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits. He talks about, you hit the stone 1,000 times and it cracks on the 1,001 time, like the 1,001 hit, but it wasn't that hit that broke the stone. It was all the steps that led up to that. And so, often, and for me, this was how I operated, was that I was so result focused that if my actions over a short time were not breeding results, I felt like, oh, I need to not do this or whatever. And it actually, over time, I kept doing them because my mentor was like, no, like, keep going, keep learning. And even things like, it seems minor, but there is an hour and a half every afternoon where I'm learning. Like I block it out of my calendar. It is my education time. I'm learning a new skill. I'm learning a new marketing tactic, whatever, but I'm always upgrading my knowledge so that my value increases. And over time, that's allowed me to be able to be in conversations like this, because you never know where it's going to lead. But it was the actions of just upgrading my skills, showing up every day, that really led to all the results I couldn't even see yet. And so
sometimes that's a good point. Is some of the times you can't see the result, so that's wherein lies it's a choice to quit or to stop or to not take action, is because you're not seeing the results yet. You're not giving it the time or allowing yourself the grace. They talk about in the NBA, anybody who watches basketball on a regular basis, what do they tell a shooter when he's going through a slump? They say, shoot through it. Keep shooting, right? You don't tell Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz when he's going through a slump to stop shooting the ball because you're terrible. No. They know he's great. They know
Yeah.
he's good. They know he's a shooter. There's a reason why he's on that basketball team is because he's a shooter. So shoot through it. Continue to build that confidence. Work through that. So allow it enough time to catch up with the results. In sales, I see guy after guy come into like get hired on, and they don't give it enough time for them to allow themselves to become that salesperson that then can start selling and changing what they're doing. And you learn through that repetition and through growing through it, and you learn what works and what doesn't work so that it can work. And I know if I get into a slump in sales, that look, I know my percentages, my long-term percentages for the year. I close about 25%, so 1 in 4. I know. Wow. 1 in 4. Well, a lot of times it'll go 10, 15, 20, and I'm like, I haven't sold anything. But I know consciously because I've done it over time and have some results. Look, just keep going.
Yeah.
Talk to a mentor, talk to somebody else, shift something a little bit, reset, and keep doing the things you do, because you can close 1 in 4, 25%. And then it could be the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 28th, 30th, 35th that makes up the difference and averages you back out again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like I kind of equate it to the moment in the book where the giant's walking away from him and he has to run so hard to keep up, but and the giant says to him, but you didn't quit. You kept coming. And that's kind of how I equate this process of growth now in my life and my business, is that even though sometimes I'm not going to feel like I'm making huge leaps and bounds, as long as I keep going, there's this progress. There's always progress. And for me, whether it looks like taking a look at something that was inefficient, how can I make it more efficient? Or downright, if you've read Brene Brown, she talks about the face and the mud in the arena. Like sometimes you're just going to fall flat on your face, and being able to kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off and go, okay, how did that happen? It's just that awareness of like, I'm not going to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. And that has been one of my greatest gifts in this whole process of change and growth and grief, and is like, doesn't have to be perfect. My journey isn't going to look like anybody else's. I'm going to get muddy.
Already out of the bag here. They already know we're not perfect right from the get-go of this show. Yeah. Well, thanks for sticking around, Giants.
Well, and one of my mentors said, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up. And so how are you going to show up? And so the more you show up, the more you get all this data. I love data. I work in metrics and ads and things like that. So I love data. And the more data you collect, the more you can kind of go, okay, what's the direction I should go?
That's like consistent is that we both have like these beautiful beards and no hair. Big foreheads is what we call it.
I love it.
So not knowing, you don't need to pursue perfection. Herbert Simon, satisficing. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He talks about satisficing. The satisficing will outperform performance or perfection. And what we tend to do is we try and get it just right. And if you're trying to do that, you're out of momentum because you're trying to perfect it and fine tune it. And if you can do what's good enough to get the job done to move forward, then that's where your life will shift. That's where it pivots. And so your life is just a series of pivots. You weren't on our schedule to be on the show this week. We had somebody else on there and they canceled. And if we were attached to them canceling, we would have paused and not taken further action because our one way fell through and we don't have another option. And we decided, it's going to work out the way it works out. One way or the other, we're going to find a solution for today. And we have a conversation with you, and Ryan asked you to be on the show. And it's amazing. This conversation is amazing. Had we been attached to the outcome that it had to be the certain person, you wouldn't be on here today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I would even submit that you were the person that needed to be on today, and that through action on both of our parts, those paths crossed at the right time. You were right on time. Yeah.
In a brief process, our willingness to grieve. Well, that sucks. Right? That was our grieving process. Well, that sucks. All right. Now what? right?
Yep.
But in a form, it was just a really quick form of grief. Like, dang,
Mhm.
that sucks. That didn't turn out the way I thought. But moving through that, and we didn't even know we were doing it until today. Moving through that opened the space and the void that you're talking about for something better to come along. Wow, that didn't turn out how I thought at all. It turned out better.
Oh,
Because,
thank you.
yeah, this is a great conversation.
Well, see, and if I had waited till I was 100% ready, I wouldn't have said yes. So
Yeah.
50% will do.
50%.
Your 50% is pretty freaking rad.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to point out all the 11s real quick. We got 111 comments as of this moment right here, 11 emojis, which is awesome. And I love the number 11. It's an indication we're on the right path, and there's just so many things in our lives that help us to see that we're right where we need to be. And it might look a little different than what you expected. And man, you just keep smiling through. I get a sense you're just grateful for all of it.
I am. That I feel like is one of my superpowers as a giant, is that I do have the ability to find the blessing in pretty much anything. But truly, my grandfather has been crucial in that process, because he just will always feel, he says to me, and this is, I just like will give you an embodiment of his level of gratitude, is I take him for our adventures. He broke his back a little over almost 2 years ago now, and they said he would never walk again. And so we didn't accept that, and we worked with his physical therapy, and he's walking again. And I take him on adventures, and we go hiking. And he always says, "Oh, my eyes are so heavy because there's so many things to see." And I just, it's so grateful for all of the things I can look at. Wow. And I just think like, wow, you're right. Like, there's so many things to be grateful for. And that's not to say that there's not challenges or hardships or things like that. But when we can have our focus to shift to gratitude, even in a challenge, that will get you through it. Like that's what I've always leaned into, is that gratitude for what is. How am I grateful for what is right in front of me?
I'm sorry, I blocked somebody's comment there.
You're good.
Yeah. So that shift to gratitude. Yeah, go ahead. You can pull that back up there. Just the whole process here that you're describing, and I can't believe we've already gone an hour in this. I could keep going, and we'll wrap up here, in the next few minutes, if you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you highlighted some really key components of the journey, because when something seems fearful, let's say it seems fearful versus being fearful, a lion in the room, that's pretty scary to me. If there's a chance it's going to attack me, if it's a tame lion, it's a little different. But the thought of fear in the future, right? Your life shifts. You have this pivotal moment and your life shifts, and there's a chance for you to resist that pivot or to accept that pivot. And our ego will resist things that are even good for us because it's different. And so in this, you had a chance to grieve the loss, to tame the lion, to grieve the loss, and open up a space for something else to come in. And in grieving the loss, you opened the space, and then you stepped onto the uncertain path, just like the character in the story. You stepped on the uncertain path, not knowing what would come of it. And in that uncertain path, you surrounded yourself with giants who showed you how to see a little different, showed you how to lean on them for support, and you started to grow. In your letting go, you grew. You grow in your letting go. I'm going to make that rhyme so it sticks. Grow in your letting go. And so when you let go, like the character in the story, when he dreams, he grows. He grows when he works, but he also grows when he just dreams and lets go. And then like you step into this path and it just keeps growing on itself. And you shifted from one path to another path. You pivoted again. And you're like, that didn't turn out how I thought. It turned out better. And then you give gratitude and you go through the same process again. It's like, that didn't turn out how I thought. You grieve it, you move on. Didn't turn out how I thought. You grieve it, you take the feedback, you adjust, you move on. And that's how we grow. And our level of giantness, our gianting, is different from somebody else's. And so we're able to turn around and serve along the path. We are already giants.
Hey, I've got two questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
First,
yeah.
Did you see this when you first started?
See what?
All of this, where you're at
Oh.
now.
No, like not at all. Like when he first got sick, I didn't know which way was up. I was just surviving. And then I realized that our lives were going to change.
I already knew
And
the answer to that, but I'm just
but I had no clue what was in front of me. And holy man, if I could go back and tell myself 6 years ago what was lying ahead, she
Holy
wouldn't believe
man.
it. Yeah, she would not believe it.
And
Like,
then
are
my
you kidding me? I'm not going down that path. That's ridiculous.
and then
It's so much bigger than I could have imagined.
then second question is what advice would you give others that are feeling the same thing and experiencing something similar right now in their lives? What would you tell them?
One of the biggest pieces for me was understanding that life happens in seasons and seasons will change. And so if you're in a season of challenge, you look for the things that will bring any bit of joy and the gratitude and the things that you can just hold on to a little bit of peace or positivity as this season is happening. And so as this season happens, let it happen. It's going to be hard. You're going to feel all the things, but this is like equipping you for what is coming. Like you're meant to do something bigger and you're just being groomed for it. I love this phrase because it feels like you're under pressure, but that pressure is going to give you purpose later on. And so you're going to take what you're learning right now. And when you can say to yourself, or at least for me, this really helped, was like, one day I'm going to be able to help somebody else who's going through this. And that's going to be what comes out of this, is that it's bigger than my husband and myself. Maybe his diagnosis allows them to understand his disease better and the treatments and things like that. And so how is this season going to change the seasons that are subsequent to this one?
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Pressure gives purpose, and purpose is made up.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. Purpose is made up. It can be whatever you want it to be, but
Exactly.
pressure gives you that. And then that purpose gives you a drive, and that drive gives you a change. And then it gives you pressure, which creates more purpose. It's a beautiful cycle.
Yep.
So
yeah, one that I'm grateful to
be
be a part of.
Well, good. Any other thoughts that came up through this, guys, as we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you guys. Like, I love this book. I told you guys this, like, you're stuck with me. Like, we're going to be friends from here on out.
We've heard that from a few people.
And I'm super grateful that you guys stepped into that to do the book and to create this. Cause even my kids, I read it to them and they took so much away from it. And so thank you guys for stepping into that and sharing and, stepping into the arena, even though sometimes it can be scary.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I received that.
Yeah, thank you.
Ryan, any other thoughts?
Tons of gratitude. If you tuned in late, go back and rewatch this. There was so many nuggets back through this thing that it was incredible. And even if you just had this to go through and you could learn from Julie, you would be so far along. This took me years and years and years to learn, and what Julie just talked about in the path and in her journey, and the secrets that are in here, because they're not broadcast everywhere. It's sometimes like it, and for me growing up, it was harder to find. It took me a lifetime, 40 years to get to where I'm at now, and understanding and just beginning to understand the power of these things. So go back, watch it again, and apply it, implement it, go gianting.
The new verb of the day.
Yeah.
Action verb. Yeah. I love it.
And make it a giant day.
Yeah.
Well, and if people do that, I want to hear in the comments. Like, I want to hear how you gianted. Like, I just love, like, I'm so excited to hear people go and step into it.
Yeah.
We can do this for you.
Yeah. So if we'll do that, just list some books in there. This really was a great topic. So thank you. And keep going, guys. You're further along than you might know. You are a giant to somebody else already, even if you can't see it. Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling down, one of the people that I absolutely love, and he's a mentor of mine, he said, if you're struggling, if you're depressed or anxious, that just means you need to serve harder. And so if you're struggling, turn around and serve somebody and watch how it boosts you. And so that'll help you in your Giants journey. So let's go ahead and wrap up here, guys. Check us out in the next episode. If you're not subscribed to YouTube yet, go ahead and do that because we have more to come. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.
Love you too.